YourDictionary.com defines prison as a place for confinement and punishment of persons convicted of crimes, especially felonies. A place for criminals. Prisoners are there because they thought they could make their own rules instead of following those set up by polite society. Criminals have decided to use their gift of free will to choose victimization of innocent through theft, assault, rape, even murder. As a result, they have been judged a threat to law-abiding citizens, unworthy of a place in mainstream society, and sent to prison to be punished for what they did. Unfortunately, today's prisons have a tendency to be too comfortable and hospitable, making incarceration more of a reward than retribution, and this is unacceptable. The article Purposes of Prisons explains that there are four main goals of prison, including incapacitation, retribution, deterrence, and rehabilitation. Incarceration successfully incapacitates lawbreakers by removing a criminal from society in order to protect people from further crimes being committed by that particular individual. Once incarcerated, the prisoner begins to suffer the retribution or punishment for the crime committed. It is important that transgressors understand that a bad decision can result in dire consequences. In theory, it is then assumed that the threat of those consequences might result in the deterrence to relapse once a convict has served his time and is released back into society. Finally, rehabilitation is defined as a convict's change in attitude towards committing crimes, and is usually considered the most important goal of the penal system. It depends on the implementation of special treatments and programs in order to succeed. However, there can be a fine line between rehabilitation and indulgence. Diane Clemens, president of Justice for All Citizens United Against Crime, says, "Our prisoners have offered so-called rehabilitation and reform programs for decades at the cost of billions of dollars and countless lives. We encourage criminals to place the blame for their activities and addictions upon others. We, as a society, did likewise. For example, when did entertainment begin to take precedence over reformation in our prison system? In an effort to rehabilitate, prisoners are treated like first-class citizens and given access to amenities often unavailable to many of the hard-working general public. James Binotto describes comfortable living conditions like air-conditioned roomy cells furnished with televisions and premium cable, and an abundance of leisure time and an ample phone allowance. Basketball courts, gyms, provide facilities for weightlifting, boxing, wrestling, and martial arts have been made available. They are even offered the choice to pursue a fully paid higher education. Criminals are not deserving of this expense. Lenient treatment made possible by the very people they had already abused." According to the article featured on the website of American Psychological Association, the United States leads the world in incarceration. While the United States only has 5% of the world's population, it has nearly 25% of its prisoners, about 2.2 million people. 1 out of every 100 American adult is incarcerated per capita, a rate of 10 times higher than in Western Europe and or other democracies. About $60 billion per year is now being spent on the state and federal prisons, up from $12 billion 20 years ago. According to the Pew Center on the States, June Tangy, a psychology professor at George Mason University who studies offender rehabilitation, found that our incarcerated policy is often costly with relatively few benefits and a lot of deleterious effects on our economy and our families and on the fabric of the communities. In spite of what the prisoners believe, they are not functioning members of society who contribute to the economy. Therefore, they are not entitled to benefit over and above other basic human rights. Some people argue that the prisoners have protected rights and laid out in the Constitution. The article Rights of Individuals in Prison said it's true that the Eighth Amendment sets the standard of living which prisoners are entitled, but those conditions are only required to meet the minimal civilized measure of life's necessities. Arguably, even this is more than some law-abiding citizens have access to on the outside. Binotto states that in addition to the basic 3 meals a day, inmates get access to free health care, including expensive surgeries, along with physical education options that rival expensive gym memberships. Average middle-class members of society often struggle to obtain affordable medical insurance for their families, let alone the money needed to join the local YMCA. Additionally, prisoners now have the easy access to an education. There's nothing wrong with an inmate being able to pursue a high school diploma or GED while in prison, but anything beyond that would actually be an insult to thousands of honest parents struggling to provide the higher education for their children while managing to actually follow rules of society. Instead, why not make continued education a requirement of parole? offer financial aid in return for good behavior during their incarceration, payable upon release, rather than doing imprisonment. So right here, this first picture is a picture of a gym that they have. As you see, there is many things in there that they do not need, but they do have them. This one is a picture of prisoners, and they are on computers, which I don't really think they should be allowed to be on computers, but they are. And